Hey, thanks for joining us here on the Coach for Life podcast. Here on the show, we talk with coaches who have not only had great success on the scoreboard, but have also had long-term success helping their players win in life. Coach, you have an incredible opportunity to make a lifelong difference in the life of your players. Don't miss it. From picking up players that had no other way to get to practice, to putting his players through very challenging practices in order to prepare them for the challenges ahead, Coach Derrick Sewell's practice field is a training ground for life. Coach shares some experiences that have had a profound impact on him. This episode is powerful. Coach, know this, we're rooting for you.
And when he would mess up, it'd bother him. I could see it bother him.
But being real is
Absolutely.
part of coaching.
Kids can read through fake.
Pure joy to just unbelievable hurt.
I've taught the quarterback how to make his RPO reads, but how have I impacted them?
You know, they're a coach. They'll always be a coach.
You show up tomorrow, you won't even understand how big of a victory that is.
Coach Sewell, it's great to have you. I know you're excited about your new undertaking here at Gaston High. And Coach, tell us about growing up. What was your experience as a youngster?
So I grew up in a little town of Henniger, Alabama, up on Sand Mountain. I came up playing youth ball at Sylvania, went to high school at Sylvania. Now, Christmas of my junior year, I did transfer and leave, went to Fort Payne. You know, as a 17-year-old kid, I thought, well, there's a better opportunity. Let me go. And I've told Brian Mashburn, who was my head coach at Sylvania, multiple times over the years, hey, I'm sorry. Yeah. I made a 17-year-old kid mistake, and my parents they let me make it. Not that they thought it. None of us thought it was the wrong thing at that time, but looking back on it, I kind of wish I wouldn't. I don't regret the friendships I made when I moved, but I should have just stayed. You know, I grew up playing ball. My dad, he wasn't the head coach, but he was always coaching the teams I was with. Sometimes that was good, sometimes it wasn't good. But it's those, when I was at Sylvania growing up, it was during the times of when everybody associates Paul Benefield with Fife, but I can remember being the 7 and 8 year old water boy. Yeah, getting yelled at by Paul Benefield to get off the field because, hey, it's when they had those good teams at Sylvania, and that's where I fell in love with high school football. That stretch of being a water boy for those teams with him there in the early 90s, and just, man, the crowd and how things went, and then just and playing at Sylvania, and even my experience at Fort Payne. And then, when I went off to college, and I'm fortunate, I got to wear that NCAA patch on my chest, but just never was quite the same. Yeah. But again, I think that's just the atmosphere of where I grew up, how we grew up through our youth sports. Always our dads always pointing at the guys over on the big field, and just us, looking to that and wanting to be that. And that's just where I fell in love with this game. And this game has, God has allowed this game to give me a lot. And I just want to be a good steward of it and give back to it.
Coach, that's great. You mentioned Coach Benefield. You mentioned your dad. Other mentors that you had. Coach Mashburn, you said.
Yeah, Brian Mashburn, he was hard on us. And he was hard on me. I was his quarterback, and I knew he loved me, but it wasn't until I became a coach that I knew just how much that at the time that he loved me. I watched him, there were days I thought, man, why is he doing me like this? But now I get it. Yeah. But when I transferred to Fort Payne, I played for Paul Ellis. It was Paul's first year as the head coach at Fort Payne, was our senior class. And, man, I learned a lot. I learned how to, he had a special way of getting you back in line, and you never heard a curse word. You never heard anything profane, but you knew when to get back in line. And again, all of those guys, I played baseball my junior year, I'm sorry, for Johnny Johnson. He had just come to Fort Payne at the time. Yeah. And I think when I became the head baseball coach at Gaston 10 years ago, I called him all the time. But, there's been others. I learned a lot from Swain Morris as a young coach. Swain he showed me some things, and I watched him in the background as I worked for him. And just picked up on a lot of things that I respected in him as a man.
Yeah.
Also. But there's probably, if I got to try to name everybody who's had an impact on me, I'd probably leave somebody out. But
well, that's a blessing that you have that problem.
Absolutely.
You mentioned communication, and it's I kind of thought I've been around a lot of coaches that communicate in a lot of different ways. And how did you form your own effective communication?
I guess there's just a little bit of all those guys that I took, that I was, subjected to their ways, and it's kind of formed, the way I am. I watched Coach Mashburn. He could be so tough on us, and sometimes there were language, and I can remember vividly. I can remember when God was working in him, because I can remember him saying, "Hey guys, you're not going to hear this as much out of me anymore." And when he would mess up, it bothered him. I could see it bother him, and that affects me. We're given this platform, and I was just talking to one of my coaches. I said, I hate to get that bent out of shape. And coach, they need it. Yeah, they do. I get it. But ultimately, what convicts me is when I'm not using the platform that I've been given, because I don't take this job lightly, because we've talked about it before. As a coach, it's an incredible platform. And when I do that, I'll beat myself up on the way home and say, "Oh, okay, well now how can I proclaim the gospel when they just saw me do this?"
Yeah. So how do you think players respond to the humanity of you just being coach? And coaches, we all know, have times when they're better than others, but being real is part of coaching.
And I guess that's what I'd say. I try to, and I tell them, and I tell my parents when I meet with them that, look, I'm going to live out, I'm going to walk this salvation out, this gospel in me. I'm going to walk it out in front of them, which means they're going to see me fail, and they're going to have to see how I respond to my failure. And it's funny, a 16-year-old kid, when you get ready to repent in front of them, "Hey guys, look, I did this, and I just want to tell y'all I shouldn't have done that," and they're like, "Coach, come on."
Yeah.
Coach, well, I mean, we say worse, we've heard worse. I understand that, but I want you to see Christ in me,
right?
And that doesn't always show if I'm letting my flesh and my anger well up, and then communication. I communicate that out. Well, it almost looks like it's going against everything I've always tried to teach you. But I think kids can read through fake.
Yes.
There's no room for
Absolutely.
fake with high school, especially with high school boys. And so I have found some of my best relationships with these kids and these players have just been, hey, succeed in front of them and fail in front of them, and just be who you are.
The thing about a football season is you go through the gamut of emotions, from pure joy to just unbelievable hurt.
Yep.
And it's a short season. I mean, it's a long season sometimes, but it's really, in the big picture, it's short. Yep. But what an impact you can have in that short amount of time.
Absolutely. And, and for, specifically here at Gaston, these seniors, I've only got this time with them. So I only have these 11 weeks, and then what we hope is more to impact them. And you're right. When we go into game week next week, albeit a jamboree week, when that happens,
yeah,
you hit that first game week, then it just snowballs, man. It goes by. And my biggest fear is to look around at the end and say, okay, how have I impacted them? Yes, I've taught them how to, pull and kick out. I've taught them how to go gap down backer. I've taught the quarterback how to make his RPO reads. But how have I impacted them? What will they carry away from being with me?
Well, that's kind of the whole premise behind this podcast is coach for life. And we all remember our coaches, they're our coach. They'll always be our coach. You'll be these guys' coach forever. And what kind of impact? And I think it means a lot more. They understand that you care a lot more about where they are 5 years from now than where they are.
Absolutely.
Maybe they do miss an assignment, and we'll work through that.
Yeah.
And it's not okay in the moment, but we'll work through that. But it's that long-term relationship that you're working for.
Absolutely. And that's You know, and it does make me proud in those moments when someone does come up and call you coach, and when it's, you know, they want you to see, hey, here's my first child, or you get invited to that wedding, or hey, you know, and look, I've had them call me and say, look, I'm having a tough time. Yeah. Okay. Well, what can I do? You know, I've sent money. I've went and, you know, delivered money when the house burnt down, and you just trying to do everything you can, because again, for so long and for so many of them, you're just that stability. That's what I told one today. You know, he's breaking a mold. Yeah. When I took this job, no one thought he would play. Well, the kid, he missed 2 workouts all summer. I give him 3 misses. He, you know, he's been at every practice. He was late today because he was going to get a physical. And he got there, and look, you could watch him. And I told him afterwards in front of the kids, I said, before you go to sleep tonight, your mind's going to tell yourself, you ain't got to go back and do that tomorrow. There's no way you need to go back and do that. And I just told him, I said, when you show up tomorrow, you won't even understand how big of a victory that is. Just come back. Just get back here tomorrow. And I think he will. And so I want them to see that modeled in me, and I hold my coaches to that standard. Hey, we got to show back up. Yeah. We just got to be back consistent here. Exactly. Because again, yeah, I got things I need to correct tomorrow, but if I don't show back up tomorrow, that could be another person that hadn't showed up in that kid's life. Right. And I don't want to be guilty of that.
So you take on the role as a coach of so many hats you wear. Mm-hmm. Share about a time maybe where you had to step in as a parent for one of your players.
Yeah, so I mean, you know, I've had a situation within the last few years where, even though it was a DHR situation, kid had a terrible home life, and you know, it was one of those things where I got a call from the administrators of, hey, if this lady comes up here today, he's probably leaving, and he'll go wherever they want to put him. And I can remember calling Holly and saying, look, we got to do something. We got to take him. And there was some hesitation. And look, even in my part, I'm asking my wife, you know, you've seen Holly, petite little woman. I think she's beautiful, and bringing a high school boy into our home, and then I've got, you know, 2 kids at home, and then we don't know how that family that's going to have this guy taken away from, how are they going to react? But I said, I think we got to take him. We've got to, even if we're just his emergency plan or safe plan, we've got to, and we were to the place where, hey, okay, we'll do it. And I think obviously the Lord is very, very good to us, and he supplied for that child's need before it had to be that thing. Things worked themselves out in a good way. You know, in less than a year's time, I have gotten a text from that same kid I wanted to bring home. Coach, you got to get to this bathroom now before I do something. Yeah. And I find him in the stall. With a knife in his hand. And he, you know, his mind's just messed up. And then I'm asking him, read your stinking guard and get to the right place. Yeah. And that kid don't care about that. Not in that. Absolutely. Not with those things going on. So, man, I mean, I tell young coaches all the time, you better decide before you ever decide to do this that you love this and that you want, because, man, coaching's going to be the smallest part of your job. You know, you're going to have to be a psychologist. You're going to have to be a daddy. You're going to have to be their friend sometimes. You know, we don't want to be their friends, we say, but sometimes you got to be somebody for them.
You're their advocate.
You're it.
Yeah.
And so those were some pretty, and look, I've only ever been in schools like that. You know, there's things that happened that first time at Gaston and at Ragland, just seeing situations, you're like, man, you know, this is pitiful that children live like this. But again,
they do.
You got to come back every day because they need you every day. So I said I wouldn't cry. That's what I told myself, at least. My wife probably knew I would.
I think it's hard to hide emotion.
Yeah, man. I mean,
and we shouldn't. And I think that's something that our players appreciate. As hard as Coach may be.
Yep.
He loves me.
Absolutely.
And I feel like I can trust him, and that's where it starts.
That's the biggest thing, is developing that trust, developing that relationship.
Coach, this goes to my next point. So how does that relate with discipline?
With me, my big thing is teaching them to discipline themselves. Like when it's time to make an excuse. Again, today we talked earlier, it was hot. It's the first time they've had to practice in the afternoon. We're in full pads. We're banging on each other. It's intense. Coaches are in people's face. We're yelling. We're trying to, create this violent atmosphere, but yet you feel like you're wearing a person on your back because it's hot.
Yeah.
And my thing was, look, you have an excuse. You do. Valid. It's hot. It's humid. Heat index. Valid excuse. But as soon as you say it out loud, you no longer can lead, because what you've shown me and others around you is mentally you're too weak right now. And I think that's the biggest thing. And look, I don't like the self-discipline, but I think there's no way you can ever lead if you're not first willing to self-discipline yourself and then willing to call out your buddies or anybody else who's not meeting the standard that has been set before you.
What do you see as the bedrock or the foundation of your program? What do you want it to be?
I want it to be built on just love. That's and golly, that stresses out young men, boys. Love, they don't want to hear that word. But my thing, if we had something that we base ourselves on, it's off an acronym called LEAD. And the L is for love, the E is for effort, the A is for attitude, the D is for discipline. And it's just make a choice. Make a choice to show back up. If you show back up, you're showing me you love me, okay?
Yeah.
You're also showing me you're disciplined enough to show back up. But I'm more concerned about, why are you showing back up? Why are you? Because if it's not because you're choosing to love those people, you may not always feel it. I may not always feel like I like you or feel like I want to be here, but I love you enough to show back up. And I have found that with kids, it's that simple. Love your teammate enough to just come back the next day.
And love your family enough.
Mm-hmm.
Love your wife enough.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love your children enough.
That's it.
Powerful.
And that's what I'm hoping is that we're instilling in these, because I've been guilty of saying, I want to be good husbands and good fathers. But again, these experiences, we have to first believe as coaches that these experiences we're giving them truly are teaching them how to be good husbands, good fathers. And if I accept less than the standard when they're 16, 17, 18 years old and let it go, then they're going to just keep slipping by. And I want them to see that, wow, this feels like the hardest thing in your life right now. Waking back up and providing for your wife the next day when you don't feel like it is hard. When you get home and you're tired and your kids want to play or they want their dad, it's hard. I fell at it all the time. Man, I don't feel like it, Jax. Tell you, just go do this. But we have to just show up. And I think that's the biggest thing I'm trying to teach these kids is, hey, continually get better and just show up.
You think coaches do a good job of connecting those dots and making sure the players understand that this is a game, but it's a big game that we're really playing. It's the coach for life thing.
Yep.
I want you to be the best player this week, but I also want you to be.
Yeah.
Do we do a good job of that?
I don't want to say we don't. I think what's hard is the person receiving that message can't wrap his or her mind around it at the moment because they're 16, 17 years old.
Right.
Now, what we hope is that you do it enough, that you talk to them about what you're trying to ultimately prepare them for and who you're ultimately trying to make them, and there'll be that day when they're done playing.
Right.
And there'll be that circumstance that makes them remember that. And then it may be then when it clicks.
Well, I think we've all had players that said, Coach, I didn't get it until I lost, I got in trouble at work, or I got I had a problem with my family, or I had to really suck it up. And now I'm able to draw on those experiences that you helped me through. Mm-hmm. And I didn't, I fought you tooth and nail.
Right.
But, I'm thankful for having that to draw from.
Like in the short run, the reason I've told these kids this week's fixing to be the hardest week that they've ever experienced in football, because I want them to understand what they go through this week. They're going to be able to meet anything that comes in these next 10. You know? Yeah. And then when you play that long game,
right?
And again, it's a short game with the seniors because I've just got with them, but you're just preparing them to face hard, because that's another challenge to these. Probably the bedrock of how I am with my parents is I'm going to present hard. I want you to teach them to desire hard. Be okay with hard. Want it. Because right now it's safe inside this field house, inside these walls of this school.
Right.
Learn how. Want hard. Learn how to handle hard, so that when you get out there, you know how to handle hard.
I've heard it said you can do life the hard way or the real hard way, based on the decisions you make. And part of what we're doing as coaches is teaching, you kind of got a laboratory in where you're teaching people how to make good decisions.
Absolutely.
And how to overcome poor decisions. A fumble is a big deal in the moment, but it's not losing a job.
Right.
How do you overcome those things?
Mm-hmm.
So, Coach, once you discover somebody's coming from a hard place or a father deficient home, how do you approach that?
So the easy thing to do would be, oh, buddy, look, we can't be too hard on Johnny because look, he's dealing with this. So I'll usually confront it. It's just me and him. Just say, look, I know you don't like the hand you were dealt, and that's fine. I know you don't, have what you need at home. And then I try to go back to where I point them back to again. You have what you're lacking in a father here. You have a father who is perfect. You have a father who loves you unconditionally. And then I'll just tell him, look, you've not had anybody teach you how to handle hard. You've watched people walk out on hard. And I'll just tell him, look, I don't treat them any softer. And I've had those kids try to quit before, and I just go back and get them. No, you're not.
You can't quit.
You're staying right here with me. And then kids can cut through fake. Just got to be real with them. You get once they know, they're willing, I think, to let you be that person. Whether they know it or not, inside they want you to be, okay, yes. I want this. So
I think to test you, Scott, I told a kid one time, I'm sorry, yesterday was the last day to quit. And he said, oh, okay.
Yeah.
And he went back and dressed out.
Yeah. Well, and it's hard.
Because I just ran out. I didn't want to have that argument right then.
Yeah.
Or try to talk him into it.
And I had two brothers before, and I won't say where, that there was a father by title around, but we live in Southside. I'd drive 411 to Asheville, pick them up out of a cinder block house, cross the mountain over to Raglan. We went 3 days a week in the summer. I did that 3 days a week in the summer. We practiced at 6 a.m. on Thursdays once the season started. I left my house at 4:45. Just did it for them, because again, what I hope is that in a few years they'll see that commitment I made in them and that investment in them, and they'll be able to invest that way in somebody or into something.
Coach, they'll call you when they're 45 and have conversations with you.
Yeah.
They do.
And like I said, and I'll get texts from time to time. Sometimes it's on Father's Day or a birthday or something, and those texts, well, you saw the emotion. It'll
Sure.
bring it out in you, because a lot of times it'll come sometimes from guys that you didn't know you were having that
right.
effect on.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Maybe they got a dad. He's a good dad, there's just something else that he got from you.
Do you think young coaches get that, or when does it? What does it happen? What happens when a coach finally goes, "Ah, I see it now"?
Man, I don't know. When I started out, especially as an assistant coach, I wanted to see how quick I could get to be a head coach.
Right.
And so I feel like I deprived myself of some experiences because I was just chasing that. And then though I can remember, those first few years as a head coach, keep an eye on what my overall record was. And you finally just get to a point where, look, I just love being around them. And I'm going to do this till I quit love being around them. That's my thing with these young coaches is, look, don't sit here and chase all these things that we think are going to make us happy in this profession. Man, just get to know these kids and get to love these kids.
We got a little thing as kind of thank you for your time. But
well, I appreciate it.
We've got a couple of videos, I think. We got 3? Okay. Hope you enjoy this.
Okay.
Hey, Coach Sewell. I just want to come on here and say how much you meant to me, from coaching me in football to get me into coaching and get me where I'm at now. If it wasn't for you, I would not be where I'm at. I just want to say I'm so thankful for everything you've done for me.
And the fact that I'm able to call myself a coach now today is just a testament to the things that you've done and the example that you set.
One thing that sets you apart from all the other coaches was your accountability, and how when you made a mistake that you owned up to it and made sure that we did the same in life.
Golly.
Sorry about that.
No, that's good.
Coach Sewell, great to have you again tonight. Appreciate you sharing your heart.
Yeah.
Appreciate what you're doing in the lives of these players that you get to impact every day.
Mm-hmm.
And just encourage you to keep doing what you're doing.
Yeah. And I thank you guys, and I think this is a wonderful thing you all are doing, and even for me after being here tonight, that this is accountability for me, because again, we get lax in what we're doing, and sometimes we just need to have it, like in those videos and in these conversations, just kind of brought back into, hey, this is why you're doing what you're doing. So I appreciate you guys, and just thankful for the opportunity.
All right. Thanks again.